Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Anthony Massey, Strategic Business Developer at Canon, and Tai Chung, the Manager of New Business Development at Canon. And it's good to have you both with us today.
Thank you for having us.
And we're going to talk about a really big topic that affects every federal agency and lots of people within agencies, and help sort out some of the complications of something that is statutory, regulatory, really important, and that is the retention and archiving of federal records. And before we get into some of the particulars, Anthony, maybe just give us a sense of what's the big picture here? What is the essential challenge in this ever-changing field right now with some new laws, some new requirements for NARA submission and so forth? What are agencies facing in general?
It's a strange time, but it's an evolutionary time. And to kind of share a story, if you remember much about history when they were preserving records in Alexandria, Egypt, or other great cities, it was all in these libraries with a lot of scrolls. And in fact, there's a story about how the Irish saved civilization during the Dark Ages because they kept the light of literary knowledge alive in their studies, their churches, etc., when nobody was really researching and keeping track of historical records. So today, what we're facing in the world is that there's a massive amount of originals in hard copy form. In fact, so much that it's become undigestible. We have so much to store and manage that now it's time to start looking at digitization, digitizing the records and moving forward in a new way.
Interesting. So even in the so-called digital age, we're still producing hard copy documents in large volumes.
Massive amounts of volumes. And in fact, that's probably the biggest challenge we have, Tom, is that there's millions, hundreds of millions of dollars being spent every year by federal agencies to create and manage and store these hard copy records. And at the same time, there's a lot of man hours to engage on where these storages are being placed and how to access them. So part of the transition, if you will, transition by the Presidential Management Directive is to begin to digitize these records, to begin to move them into an archiving process that's easier to manage, being able to then make them more accessible and reduce the expenses.
Right, and there are some guidelines. There's the Federal Agency Digital Guidelines Initiative, kind of this paperless transformation that people are talking about, FADGI. Give us a little background on that particular initiative.
This was started probably a little over 10 years ago as kind of a concept of how to begin to guide agencies into what kind of a digitization format to create a standard that all agencies could then roadmap their policy and procedure to. And part of that would be to be able to give to NARA and the Library of Congress, the two major entities of government record management, expectation of a standard that when they digitize records of different types, and we can talk about that in a minute about what that means as far as types of records and how that digitization process must be managed based on what the type of record it is in order to maintain the integrity of the document. And that was started as part of a process that was going to be implemented under what we call the FADGI, or Federal Agency Digital Guideline Initiative.
And there's some deadlines here too, right?
There is, and it was supposed to be December, the end of December of 2022, but as it got closer to the deadline, there was a realization that the agencies weren't ready. And so now the new directive of starting this process is June 30 of this year.
And Tai, records management has been around, as Anthony said, since time immemorial when people put away scrolls. But in this digital age, even with paper, there's something essentially different now, isn't there? Even with paper and digital kind of coexisting.
Yes, since I represent the document scanning or imaging industry, just wanted to point out that document scanning has evolved over the past couple of decades in such a way that scanner manufacturers, have been developing software engineering techniques to tell the text from the background and apply, the special software image processing to essentially enhance the visibility of the text element while erasing unwanted graphics on the background. And then OCR, optical recognition engine technology can kick in to pick up the text information and pass it to an application, software application, which will then tag the document, index the document for later search and retrieval. So, obviously the intent is pretty much different from that to digitize cultural heritage documents Anthony was alluding to earlier. Typically the end result from our conventional record management practice would be the bitonal, what we call bitonal black and white or even grayscale images suitable for OCR engine, like I said, whereas the scanning of the cultural heritage document is most often done on a planetary or flatbed technology scanners.
Right, so the difference is in one case, it is the picture of the thing that you need to retrieve. In the case of, I guess what we're talking about is modern textual records, you still need to keep the piece of paper, but you can withdraw the text from it, make that searchable and digital, where someone doesn't need to see the piece of paper because there's nothing cultural about a picture of the background of the agency. Is that a fair way to characterize it?
Right, exactly. So intents are somewhat overlapping, but two different intents essentially. And basically, traditionally, the record management focuses on the information that gets extracted from the document, whereas this new regulatory requirement is focusing on creating a digital replica of the paper originals.
So you have to do both.
Yes, we have to find a balance to still meet the what FADGI specifications require.
Give us an example of some of the records that might be affected by this new regime.
Well, for the still image area, which involves printed documents that could be printed via a laser printer or inkjet printer or some kind of a typesetted document. Those are the types of still images that you would want to be able to digitize and make accessible through what we call the modern textual records process. When NARA and the working group of FADGI began to establish classifications of imaging for digitizing these various types of records, they discovered in that particular context of the printed record, there was a need to get a special type of digitization process called MTR that was simpler, less involved with much less expensive equipment that could do a very high quality image and make it transportable into an archive.
Right, because in the cultural heritage type of document, the background might be just as important. Or if it's a letter written by Lincoln or something on parchment paper of that era with ink, then OCR is not going to do you any good.
No, it won't. It will preserve what is the typed information. It would not give you the exact feel of the document that you're holding in that sense. But a lot of where we are today as far as creating the millions, actually billions of records that are being generated by the federal agencies today, it's not using that type of platform. They're printing them out. They are registering them as either temporary or permanent records. And when they do that, then they identify what they want to do with those length of preservation and where it's stored.
Because all of those records would have been created with word processing in some digital manner to begin with,
Right.
but then they are printed out as part of the official process.
And that official process then requires that it has to be put into a lifetime history. So it becomes a accessible record that, for example, NARA wants to be able to put on an online catalog. So if they have a subject or a particular topic that somebody wants to research, they can go to a NARA or Library of Congress online catalog and look up that document instead of having to go in person to a particular storage site or physically go and handle that document. This will be a far more accessible type of research.
For example, maybe the recent presidential order on artificial intelligence, kind of a landmark document. It's quite lengthy. That would be something where you might later on want to get the information from it, but you wouldn't need to pull the paper record out from it because the information would have been digitized under this TMR type of regime, but yet there is a paper record in storage if for some reason you did need to touch it.
Exactly. And when it comes to digitizing those types of documents, the complexity of the type of equipment being engaged and the skill set of the people that are going to be responsible is part of this process. And what we at Canon are promoting is that we have the equipment and the knowledge. We have a tested, third-party, validated process that can show that a type of scanner that we have that fits this MTR process can be installed and employed on-site or off-premise and be able to maintain a very high quality of the MTR process for digitizing the record before it goes into either a hosted NARA facility or a commercially agreeable product hosted system.
And let's get a little bit more into the MTR, modern textual records. This is the emerging and high volume thing that agencies have to deal with. I guess everybody's turning these out. Tell us more about them and what people need to know pursuant to preserving them and archiving them.
Well, as part of the outlining of the guidelines for digitizing various types of documents, initially the FADGI working group started with what they call a star system, FADGI 1, 2, 3, and 4-star ratings, and they were intended to establish a minimum requirements for capturing different types of documents that could be in hard copy or bound form. They could be photographs. There could be a lot of color engaged, so they had different star ratings. And then as they began to apply that level of information capture, they realized that for printed records, for any types of documents that were printed on modern textual paper, it was overkill. It was too much trying to capture information that really didn't need to be. So they established this modern textual record standard, and that was intended to basically set up an imaging and a processing standard that allowed types of documents that could be digitized that would include textual content or still images. Maps, for example, could be another part of that, or any type of product that was printed on standard paper today. And that type of ink could be applied. That could have been inkjet, it could have been laser, it could have been even in a typewriter, could have been type of ribbon, type of original. So on those types of output, then the modern textual record scanning process became the method that was the most effective, efficient, and easy to apply.
So it builds on OCR, but it's not exclusively OCR.
Correct. It does digitize the information, but it establishes also a method of using a metadata process where you're establishing different points of data that are being captured through the digitizing process. And that would be that you would have administrative metadata that would be part of the scanning process. It would also describe what type of document that you're scanning as part of establishing the historical reference point that this MTR record was digitized under these standards. So that metadata would always be part of the image.
So in other words, it is fundamentally different from other forms and techniques for records management.
Yes, it's specific for printed documents, printed modern paper types of documents. That's really where its focus is, because 80% of most of the documents that are generated in the federal agencies today are on printed type of paper like that.
Sure. So a lot of people then, I think, might mistake Federal Agency Digital Guidelines Initiative, FADGI, as a hardware standard, but it's not really that, is it?
It isn't. It's a process or an image standard to guideline is really what it is. The hardware then must be aligned to those scanning requirements, and that's really where it's kind of a trade or one and two part process. So the hardware itself also becomes aligned to a test image, a test chart, if you will, that verifies that when it's scanned under that particular setting, it matches what is called an MTR standard. So the hardware itself then becomes part of the capture process, not just simply the image itself.
Okay, got it. And Ty, this is not then your standard basic scanner then?
Yes, correct. You know, quite honestly, the biggest challenge for scanner manufacturers have been, upon this new regulatory requirements to kind of reverse engineer the latest and the greatest hardware platform and retrofit those to meet what the FADGI guideline require. And Canon, Canon is known for a lot of technologies, but imaging and optics engineering has been our core competency for the last 90 years. Believe it or not, we've been taking. I always say this: we've been taking a lot of pictures. But our document scanners have been deployed in a variety of record management workflows to help our customers to digitize, streamline their business processes and help them meet various regulatory requirement. Regulatory requirement in such key vertical markets as like in healthcare, financial, education, legal, and we have been in this list of the U.S. patent assignees for the last 40 years. That shows our commitment to our innovations as well as environmental sustainability and social responsibilities. In fact, not many people know about this, but our imaging expertise culminated with the launch of two satellites, a Canon manufactured satellite equipped with our camera components in it.
Interesting, yeah. So the range, so maybe your printers print out the documents and then they scan them at the end. Maybe that could be combined into one machine at some point. But it strikes me too that since we are talking about the scanning of this type of paper, then there's an element of speed you can bring to it relative to traditional scanners and flatbeds.
Speed is a very important part of it when you're looking at what we would call a backfile project, where you have older records and they have a life expectancy that will have to then become no longer managed. There's the opportunity to make sure that you could use a hardware type of scanner that would be able to do it very fast, very quickly. And at the same time, when you look at when records management officers have to also look at the process for day forward scanning of anything, knowing that from that day forward, they also have to digitize these records. You want access to equipment that can do that at a setting that is confidently MTR standard capable. And second, they can retest it, easily verify that if they do a batch of scanning, that it would, from start to finish, it captured it into the right MTR standard, or else it wouldn't, you wouldn't want to send it over to NARA or Library of Congress and have it rejected. So that's part of what Canon's vision is to establish verification of that. And we're doing that also for those who have to start writing technical documents to enlist skills or hardware to do this. So Canon's making available to the public a white paper about modern textual record scanning. And we've also engaged the third-party company to do a video, a recording of the performance of a scanner doing MTR scanning and making that available, and that will be part of actually the Federal News Network's package of information we're making available to you.
We'll look forward for that. And we've got about a minute left. You mentioned some of the human skills needed. Let's maybe elaborate on those to the extent you can.
Yes, it's going to be procurement related too. I mean, our records management officers will have to look at setting up RFPs that will be written around statement of work requirements that they've never done before. Mm-hmm. So part of why we wanted to educate records management officers about Canon's availability of this technology is that it will help them establish a process of a solicitation, if you will, for digitizing their records. And they can do that either in-house or it may be third-party. Part of NARA's commitment was to establish and identify third-party companies that are identified as what they call special item numbers, SIN code specific, authorized to scan under FADGI guidelines.
Interesting. Well, a lot to think about and some new challenges for government that you'll help them with. I want to thank our guest today. Anthony Massey is Strategic Business Developer at Canon. Tai Chung is the Manager of New Business Development at Canon. I'm Federal Drive host Tom Temin. You're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, please visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Canon.